Good evening, everyone. It is that time of the evening that we will begin our Police Reform Task Force. Tonight, we have another group joining us to present and discuss another important topic. Tonight, we have the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives that will talk to us, and I'm sure there's one topic that many will have questions about. Our list of presenters was shared with you in advance of the meeting. However, we will go through and mention them again. The meeting will be facilitated by Ms. Marita Bryan. She will facilitate the discussion. There will be time for members of the task force to ask questions, and we will allot until 6 p.m. for the presentation and discussion. And then the last 30 minutes will be a task force meeting to discuss work pertinent to the task force. Co-chair Roberts.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Bullock. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so very much for availing yourself to task force members in this critical endeavor. And we really do look forward into your open dialogue and candid discussion.
Look like she got frozen out. She's welcoming everyone. She'll join us shortly while her technology catches up with us. I would like to take some time to welcome to the task force Rabbi Simons. He is joining us. Were you able to get on?
I'm here, yes. Thank you.
Very, very good. You're not on video?
I think I am. Maybe so. David, can you see me? I think I am.
All righty. Oh, there you go. Very good. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
All right. All right. And I would also like to just remind everyone that when you have a question, we ask that you use your raise your hand icon. Please do not shout out questions. We want to be respectful for others who have identified their hand to ask questions. And we'll do our very best to keep an eye on when hands come up, to acknowledge you, to give you that time to talk, make a question, or make a comment. All right. Very good. I will now turn it over. If there are no other announcements or opening remarks, turn over to Ms. Bryan who facilitates today's discussion.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for allowing members of NOBLE to address your task force today. Our discussions this evening were not designed to address any specific incidents or investigations occurring in the city of Pittsburgh or Allegheny County, although we know you have some questions and we will try to answer them as best we can. One of the common themes that we have will resonate throughout our discussions is how only through open communications, collaborations, and good working relationships will there truly be positive changes in police reform. One of the first speakers that we have to address you is our national president, Linda Williams. She's retired from the United States Secret Service, and she's currently the national president. She retired as a deputy assistant director in 2017. Linda, are you on? She may have to unmute. Linda, unmute.
I'm on.
Okay.
Thank you. My fingers was quicker than my computer.
Okay. You ready?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. To the Mayor's Community Police Reform Task Force, my past president, Madam Bryan, and other NOBLE members and constituents of the city of Pittsburgh. I bring you greetings on behalf of the Executive Board, members and constituents of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE. Again, I am Linda Williams, and I proudly serve as the 43rd National President of NOBLE. I've served more than 30 years in the law enforcement arena, as she stated, retiring as a Deputy Assistant Director for the United States Secret Service. I'm currently a professor of criminal justice administration at Middle Tennessee State University. It's an honor for NOBLE to share in today's discussion on the topic of police reform. NOBLE joins our nation in condemning the police tactics, actions, and inactions that led to the death of Mr. George Floyd. We also are alarmed and mourn with the nation at the horrific killings of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and Rayshard Brooks. These names just represent just a few in a much longer list of tragedies impacting communities of color. The senseless death of George Floyd has gained unprecedented attention around the globe. People from every walk of life are collectively demanding that justice must be fair, justice must be transparent, and justice must be equal. Though it is very important that the Minneapolis police officers involved are prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, it is just as important that we address the systemic shortcomings and oftentimes failures of our law enforcement and criminal justice systems. Many police leaders in the United States have already accepted this monumental responsibility that they are obligated to work towards meaningful change. NOBLE is fully aware that addressing issues within the law enforcement spectrum is a very small part of a larger, more complex construct comprised of America's continued imbalanced distribution of critical resources. History has shown that minority citizens have been disenfranchised from the American dream from generation to generation. America would never realize her true potential until all of its citizens' humanity is equally valued and protected through racial and social justice. NOBLE continues to work to achieve effective police community policing practices that ensure the public and officers are safe. The Justice and Policing Act of 2020 encompasses many other solutions law enforcement and communities have agreed that will help improve public safety, build trust, and increase accountability. NOBLE supports modernizing policing in our country through the following proposed national policies: prohibition on chokeholds and vascular neck restraints, national review on prohibition on no-knock warrants for drug cases, implementation of a national registry of individuals who have been disciplined for use of force and dismissed from any law enforcement agency, national accreditation standards for law enforcement agencies, mandatory de-escalation and implicit bias training for law enforcement officers, limitations on qualified immunity for law enforcement officers, federal enforcement of the civil prohibition on a pattern or practice of policing that violates the Constitution or federal laws, limited transfer of military surplus equipment, requirements for body-worn cameras for law enforcement officers, and last, national data collection and reporting on use of force by law enforcement. We wholeheartedly support the passing of the Justice and Policing Act, which specifically addresses the loopholes that continue to allow police tragedies free of oversight and accountabilities, environments that foster unfestered racial tension, and the continued desecration of what I consider is a noble profession. We also recognize the majority of police officers who demonstrate on a daily basis their love and commitment towards the tenets of 21st century policing and the safety and well-being of the communities they so courageously serve. However, today at this critical time in history, NOBLE encourages Congress to act with deliberate haste to pass transformative legislation to reform the system of policing, to effectively snuff out every possibility of racial bias that has thrived in the belly of our industries for decades. As president of NOBLE, I can unequivocally attest to the perpetual existence of discriminatory practices that remain a haunting reality for people of color throughout our nation. It is critical that we first acknowledge the pressing need for a comprehensive and holistic approach to change, and then urgently begin the process of mapping the ways towards policing reimagined. Enlisting guardians to wear the badge, not warriors, and those who value our communities and the sanctity of life. On behalf of more than 3,800 law enforcement leaders, mostly minority, who represent the membership in Noble, we thank you for supporting the law enforcement profession, but most importantly, for listening to the voices of protesters around the globe who demand change. On this occasion, I echo the sentiments of those who preceded me, that I too cautiously optimistic that the cries of our America will be heard and acted on, so that once and for all, Black lives are valued in the eyes of all police officers as more than a counterfeit $20 bill, more than some loose cigarettes, and more importantly, than simply showing up at the wrong address. Noble calls on the United States Congress, again, to quickly implement effective 21st century policing procedures and deliver the change America needs right now. I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President gave us just an overview of what Noble stands for and the work that is being done both in Washington, D.C. and throughout our 6 regions. Next, I would like to call Dr. Joseph McMillan to talk about some of the strategies that are used by Noble. Dr. McMillan?
Good afternoon. I appreciate the ability to offer a few comments as part of this panel. By way of background, I'm a retired senior executive service federal law enforcement official with more than 42 years of public and military service. I hold an undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral degree in criminal justice, as well as a graduate degree in strategic intelligence. I'm also a postdoctoral fellow with the Institute for Polarities of Democracy and a past national president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. As part of my presentation, I will endeavor to identify those areas of my comments that are mine and those areas that represent the position of Noble. Let me first state that if we can't see a problem, we can't fix a problem. Policing is a profession with an expectation of having high standards. There are minimal areas for not getting a situation right. To that extent, we must ask ourselves that when presented with the awesome ability to reimagine policing in the 21st century, what does true reform look like? Will we tinker around the edges, or will we roll up our sleeves and tackle what some might view are intractable issues that demand our attention? This approach aligns with Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa, who was quoted as saying, "It always seems impossible until it's done." Noble prides itself on being the conscience of law enforcement. From this perspective, Noble believes a comprehensive approach is required in addressing the issues of police culture, accountability, and building trust between police agencies and the communities that we have taken an oath to protect and serve. It is from this platform that Noble engaged in supporting and advancing the 21st Century Policing Task Force effort developed by former President Barack Obama to address critical issues, policing issues confronting America. Specifically, its Noble position relative to the following. There's a need to establish a clear set of expectations and guidelines that define the accountability and oversight of police to and by all of the American people. Second, police disciplinary action, if warranted, must be open for public review. Third, there needs to be a systemic understanding that the lack in some cases of transparency and communications by law enforcement authorities helps to create an environment of confusion and mistrust. And as my president just alluded to, she identified for you some of the areas that Noble believes are national policy issues that need to be enacted. So I won't revisit those. The 21st Century Policing Task Force identified several pillars to guide law enforcement officials and enforcement towards reforms. Specifically, 3 of the pillars touch on various areas of reforming the police culture from a warrior to guardian mentality. Pillar 1, building trust and legitimacy. Pillar 2, policy and oversight. And Pillar 4, community policing and crime reduction. These areas are supported by Noble, where it takes a position that the ultimate goal in police accountability is to strengthen trust and legitimacy between law enforcement and the community. Additionally, Noble maintains the first action step in reconstructing a new policing system is to take immediate steps in strengthening police accountability and building trust with communities. For the most part, there is a need to dismantle existing operational systems and develop new evidence-based systems in discipline and accountability. When considering duty to intervene requirements, the ethical policing and courageous model developed by the New Orleans Police Department is being implemented by many departments. Such innovation is what is needed to change the culture in policing. To address reforms in policing, Noble has embarked on an innovative alliance with the Institute for Polarities of Democracy to evaluate specific 21st century policing pillars through the polarity of democracy lens. The polarity of democracy theory grew out of over 50 years of Dr. William Benet's efforts and studies as a scholar practitioner seeking to use democracy as a solution to the problems of oppression. Polarities of democracy theory and polarity thinking are now being used around the world as a guide to build healthy, sustainable, and just communities in the United States and several international countries in Europe and Africa. For those unfamiliar with polarities, they are interdependent pairs like inhaling and exhaling that are ongoing and that can't be solved by choosing one of the poles as a solution. Another example is activity and rest. Each of those 2 poles may seem to be at cross purposes with one another, but choosing one of the poles as a solution will lead to problems if you apply either or thinking to the tension. Both and polarities depend on both poles over time. An example would be justice and due process. They're interdependent. We can leverage interdependencies when we can supplement either or thinking with both and thinking. Using our expertise and capabilities within the Institute, we've embarked on an initiative to engage with and support Noble's efforts to transform policing culture from a warrior mentality to one of guardianship through transformational reforms, particularly related to the tenets of 21st century policing and the Justice in Policing Act, by developing model policies consistent with those 21st century policing pillars of building trust and legitimacy, policy and oversight, and community policing and crime reduction. The Institute will develop an advocacy agenda, and again, there's several things that the Institute will do as a part of this initiative, but the main thing I want to get across relative to this is we're going to look at the 21st century report through that lens of polarity thinking. So why would anyone want to embark on polarity thinking? I'm going to give you an example. The Institute, an example would be the value in considering novel approaches such as the Illumination Project, which was implemented by Charleston Police Chief Greg Mullen, who provided additional template to use the principles of polarity thinking, following the horrific Mother Emanuel AME church murders. The project was designed to bring together all parts of the community, foster engagement and civil dialogue in support of a common greater purpose statement. The greater purpose statement selected for that community was to further strengthen and broaden collaboration between the City of Charleston Police and the citizens they serve. Another key polarity guided the work, which was based on societal values, public safety, and individual rights. Communities are demanding change in the area of accountability and reformation of the policing culture as we know it today. I contend that we have a template in the 21st Century Policing Report that provides an outline for change and achieving accountability if we are willing to embrace it. And thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. McMillan. That just kind of give an overview from a national perspective of what Noble is doing, what type of process that we're going to go through to accomplish our goals. Now I'm going to bring it back home a little locally and introduce you to the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the DEA here in Pittsburgh, and that's Paris Pratt Sr.
Thank you, Ms. Bryan. Again, my name is Paris Pratt, and thank you for having me tonight. Before I begin speaking about DEA, I wanted to talk to you about myself a little bit. I was born in Philadelphia, raised in Camden, New Jersey. So I didn't have a pro-law enforcement background growing up in the city of Camden. It wasn't until I got to college that I understood that in order to change something, you had to do it from the inside. So after graduating from college, I went back home to Camden, and there was two professions that I thought about, being an educator and being in law enforcement, because I thought I could be productive in either career. Fast forward, I ended up getting on with the DEA. I worked in New York, Bogota, Colombia, Birmingham, Alabama, Camden, New Jersey, where I grew up, and that was a special time for me. I also worked in headquarters, and now I'm here in Pittsburgh. Again, my title is Assistant Special Agent in Charge, which means that I'm the DEA supervisor in Western Pennsylvania. If you didn't know, DEA is singular focus. We enforce federal drug laws only. However, we'll look into murders and terrorism and things like that if it's attached to drugs. We have 239 domestic offices and 91 foreign offices in 68 different countries. Back in 2015, DEA thought that we needed to reach out more to the community. We were going through the opioid epidemic at that time. And Pittsburgh was the pilot office for this strategy called 360 strategy. And where we focused a three-pronged approach, it was community outreach, law enforcement, and diversion control. And some of the objectives were to bring the different elements together, the local communities to speak about the problems, have a lasting impact through increased awareness, and change attitudes to reduce demand reduction in collaboration with the city, state, and other federal counterparts. DEA couldn't do its job without our law enforcement community nor the community outreach program, because everyone that we deal with are not criminals, and we might have sources of information from the community and or cooperating defendants that want to improve their community and or family. So we're all in this together, and thank you for this opportunity, and I'll pass it back to Ms. Bryant.
Okay, thank you, Paris. I'm not sure if Chief Bickerstaff, she was having trouble getting on. Chief, are you on? If she's not on yet, we're just going to try to reach her and then move on to
Chief
Bickerstaff. Okay, so we're going to move on to Theodore Johnson. I'm sure a lot of you on the call know him as Ted. He's the chairman of the board for probation and parole. And he's gonna, because when you talk about police reform, it's not just police that you have to deal with. Our whole criminal justice needs reform. So Ted is going to talk to you about some things on the probation and parole side. Ted?
Thanks, Marita, and thank you, committee, for having me. David and Richard, I've worked closely with you prior to this present job that I have as chairman. Many of you know that I was the chief of federal probation for Western District of Pennsylvania and worked in that department for about 25 years. the last 10 as chief. After retirement in 2011, I became the associate director of a few female halfway houses in Allegheny County that were used by Allegheny County courts before I was appointed by Governor Wolf to this present position as chairman of the State Parole Board. Some of the things that I have worked 44 years in this field. I worked in Erie County, where I started Allegheny County probation, of course with the feds, nonprofit, and now with the state. It's a unique career where it's a combination of law enforcement and social work, which I enjoy. Some of the things that we are doing in state parole, I want to go through that, are a lot of the things that we did in the federal probation and pretrial services. Western District, as far as reentry, we were the first district to utilize guys who had come, at least one former inmate, former offenders who had been a two-time drug, who had gone to prison for 2 drug cases. We hired Paul, who is still there, Paul Gamble, and he was head of our reentry program. His job was to go out and recruit employers and to speak to some of the people on our caseloads as to careers and other jobs. We're doing pretty much the same in state parole. We're heavily involved in reentry court for veterans, drug court, and looking constantly to help those ex-offenders come out and gain some employment. As a chair, I think there's 2 programs that I have really been proud of. In the 2016 Supreme Court versus Miller came out and said it was no longer, we were no longer able to sentence juveniles to life in prison. So at that point in time in the country, there were 2,500 juveniles who had gone to jail under the age of 17 and were spending their life. Some of those guys were 60, 65 years old by the time they got to the parole board. Out of the 2,500, 530 of those were in Pennsylvania. Out of the 530, 311 were from Philadelphia. I am proud to say that as of this point, we have paroled 300 of those juvenile lifers, and with some still being resentenced and will be coming before us. What we're proud of is that since 2016, we have released 300, and only one of those juvenile lifers has come back with a violation, and it was not a violent violation. It was drug related. The reason I think for the success is because everybody was on board. That meant the courts, district attorney, the defense bar, the Bureau of Prisons, probation and parole, the community, and the juvenile lifers themselves, who have formed groups in different parts of the country to support each other. So the collaboration is really what's working, and it's working so much. It's been so successful that we are now asking Congress to let us look at 18 to 24-year-old third-degree murder cases where the defendant was not a shooter. So I'm pretty proud of that. The other thing is we have conducted safe return throughout the state. And today, a press conference in the governor's office, we are going to conduct safe return again, not on the scale that we have in the past because of the pandemic. In the past, we have used federal, state, and local, any federal, state, and local warrant that was out there. We had a 4-day period where they were able to turn themselves in for favorable outcomes. It was not amnesty, but favorable outcomes. Because of and we were scheduled to do that in Pittsburgh. here in October, but again, that's been canceled because of the pandemic. But state parole, we are still going to do ours. The dates for that are going to be August 24th through September 4th. And what Safe Return is going to do is anyone with a parole warrant in the state, we are asking that if you turn yourself in and you do not have a new charge, and you've absconded, but there's no new charge, we are just going to place you back under supervision. If there are new charges, then we are going to handle those, but because you've turned yourself in, myself and the 8 other parole board judges will take that into consideration when we're handing down how much time you're going to owe us. Again, those dates are going to be August 24th through September 4th, and there will be information forthcoming to in publications around the state.
He knows his stuff.
So the other thing that I want you to realize is that, yes, I've spent a big portion of my life in law enforcement, but there is one other organization that I am very proud of. It's a local organization that some of you may be aware of. It's Mad Dads. Mad Dads was the idea of my college roommate and some other guys who I'd gone to college with. And we are, at this point in time, 60 males who on a weekly basis patrol areas that are drug infested or there is high crime. We coordinate with law enforcement, and we act as a liaison between the community and law enforcement while doing that. So let's just say that someone in the community says there's drug activity on some odd corner, and we work mainly out of Wilkinsburg and Homewood. It is our job at that point in time, we coordinate with law enforcement, and then we go out and enforce, and we just become a nuisance to those being a nuisance. We don't go out and preach the gospel. We just go out and hang out on the corner. We have green shirts. We're very visible. And we will hang out on that corner every day. At the night, and we go out at 12 midnight. We might be out there till 2 o'clock in the morning. But it was an idea that George Spencer had where males had not been, we had been absent from the community. And the female had really taken the majority of the responsibility of raising our kids. So we wanted to give something back to the community because we had all been blessed. And that again, we go out and we maybe do some cleaning in some areas of the city. We have, when there's trouble with some of the high schools, we will show up around the time that they're letting out and just sort of hang out so that there are no fights. We have, with the U.S. Attorney's Office coordinating, there is a spot downtown that our organization with some other organizations go down and just make sure that the kids are safe as they're getting out of school and getting on the bus. So that is one of the proudest things I think that I've done aside from my work in law enforcement. The common theme for all the successes that I have had has been collaboration. And I think it is the same with this. I think that the community and law enforcement and the other agencies, we need to collaborate. Working in a silo does not work. For me, working with Noble, who also should be a liaison between the community and law enforcement, because we are African American, we are the minorities. We are minority out of uniform, and we are law enforcement in uniform. So it's a struggle. I mean, it takes me back to the days in the 60s when, light-skinned, I wasn't black enough, and I certainly wasn't white enough. But I think that Noble has a unique position of understanding both sides and should be brought to the table. Organizations like Mad Dad, again, should be brought to the table because they understand what's going into the community, and coordinating with law enforcement, we have a relationship with them. So if anything should be taken away from this podcast is collaboration, is that we all need to work together. And I close with this. I think that since we only have a few days till the election, I think that the biggest collaboration we can have is to all work towards votes, getting votes out, no matter who you want to vote for. But I think that everyone should, I think we should all be on the same page and sort of put all of our guns down and lead to that one day in November where we're going to be voting for someone at the top to lead our nation. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Next, we're going to have, Ted is a immediate past president of the Pittsburgh chapter of Noble. And now I'm going to bring on our current chapter president, Ernest Withrow, to address you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Am I being heard?
Yes, yes.
I was glad to hear Ted say that the collaboration is an important point, and the local Noble, in fact, collaborates with many organizations that are within our neighborhood. But I'd like to really stress justice by action. That's what our motto is, and I like to think it's exactly what we do. In the world we live in, there's much turmoil that has been woven into the fabric of our day-to-day lives. The social construction has influenced cultural upheaval as well as ethnic cleansing. While there has been many attempts to eradicate racial barriers, little has changed. Prejudice and discrimination continues to cause disparity in the distribution of employment opportunities, fair wages, legal representation, and educational equality. These deficiencies continue to perpetrate racial segregation. It seems that the city, or the cry for change, is more prevalent in the time of political sparring or occurrences of historic incidents. Generally, these incidents are addressed through public gatherings of people in show of disapproval. The length of time dedicated to the protest will determine the importance of the cause. I'd like to really address or to acknowledge those individuals, young people, older people who are out in the community, even this day, protesting and showing the concern that something is awry, something is wrong, something needs to be changed. It's important that people state their position and actually go into the community and protest. Sometimes the protests are looked upon as a good thing, and other times it's looked upon as being inconvenience. You know, it stops traffic at times, it stops business. People are inconvenienced and they have problems with that. However, people are demanding change. Currently, the nation is undergoing a pandemic that has restricted normal public gatherings, which most likely has added to the unrest, simultaneous protests. However, the protest has gained support of other countries. The protest is a result of police tactics that have ended in killings of citizens. Nationally, the action of the police has called for focus and protest for reform. The practice in which physical force is used to apprehend someone suspected of a criminal act on the surface, it appears that the deaths, to name a few, for instance, Cleveland's 12-year-old Tamir Rice, Antoine Rose, George Floyd, Eric Garner, in Ferguson, Michael Brown, in St. Paul, Philando Castile, were at the hands of the police, originally reported to be isolated incidents. However, there are aspects that insulate the acts were racially motivated. To begin to address police reform, we must identify where reform is warranted. The action of a few rogue police should not require a total revamping of the police department. It would be misleading to lay blame for the social ills of society solely at the feet of the local police department. If true reform is sought, it would be prudent to examine the judicial system as well. It would be equally irresponsible to ignore the frustrations being felt in communities of color. There has always been problems and concerns about equal housing, employment opportunities, equal wage pay, access to health care, equal distribution of education funds. You know, until that motto, protect and serve, is applied to everyone, people of color will continue to be disenfranchised. Currently, we have the real problem that is brewing, and that's the school to the prison pipeline, which is affected truly by the lack of good housing, employment opportunities, equal wage pays, and access to health care. All of these issues truly affect our children and will continue to affect our children unless we, in fact, do something about it. It would be wrong for us at this point not to identify the things that need to be taken care of and simply say that if we right the wrong of the police department, things will be well. That's not going to be true. And as long as our children are being harassed and being without, we in fact are going to find ourselves, if we could say, behind the 8 ball. It's unfortunate that the one thing that we can count on as people of color in this country is the fact that we can go to prison. And that's terrible. It's terrible that we have only that to look forward when we as people have dedicated so much time and effort and labor to the making of this country to be what it is. So often we, the people of color, find ourselves without true recognition, and we have been disenfranchised. Unfortunately, that disenfranchisement has caused a stigma, and we are burdened with it. We need to constantly concentrate on change. And as I said, not change because a few rogue police or a few individuals have not paid quite attention or addressed the situation. We need to continue to do this until the fight is no longer needed, however long that takes. I agree with the previous individual, Mr. Ted Johnson, that collaboration is needed. But we constantly talk about getting together, doing whatever it takes to meet the needs. But so often it's rhetoric. We need to find ourselves actually boots on the ground, doing that which is necessary. And because I'm particularly concerned about our children, I think Noble Pittsburgh is addressing our children and some of the problems that we have. This is done by our law in your community, in which we go into the schools, we speak to the children or the young adults. And not only do we speak to them, we hear and listen to what they have to say. It's very important that we spend that time with our young people so that they begin to understand that the criminal justice system is not a system that they have to fear, but one that offers a true career line. So often our children only identify with the police department or with criminal justice workers simply as, plainly said, the boogeyman, someone or some group to leave alone and stay away from. And consequently, you know, that's a great field that our children are missing out on. One of the ways that I feel that may be of help to our children in bringing them alongside and joining into the field of corrections and the field of policing is to have the police department and the likes back into the community, join back to the community, speaking to our children, attending the meetings that are being held. We at Noble welcome the police department and other authorities into our meetings so that we too can share what is going on and what can we do as an organization to help the individuals that are out and need help. A lot of our young people are suffering from mental illness. That mental illness comes from the lack of good housing, poor employment that the parents are suffering from, the lack of wages. And there's so much and so much more that we need to address. And I hope in the future that we all will continue to address these issues. And I thank you for the time.
Okay, thank you, President Withrow. Unfortunately, Chief Biggerstaff has not been able to get on. She's still at her office, and there they use Teams. And I don't know if it's a connection between trying to get on Zoom there with their network. I don't know.
Just got on.
She just got on.
Oh, did she get on? Oh, okay. All right. Woo-hoo. Okay.
Thank you. I do apologize. And it does have a lot to do with the city of Pittsburgh's use of Teams, but I have brought my own computer and I just could not connect. So please forgive me. I missed everything from the beginning, but I'm sure it's been enlightening to everyone. I know there was a brief introduction, and my career spans over 30 years here with the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. And I am so happy to say that I never looked at this as a job, but I've always looked at it as a calling, an ability to connect with the community and to forge ahead with the community. And that's what the Pittsburgh Police continues to do. Our whole mission here is community policing, community engagement, and of course, filling in the gaps that we miss as law enforcement officers. We want to be that connecting force. There are many initiatives that we're part of, and of course, during the question and answer period, I can get into that. But I want to piggyback on what the Noble President, Ernest Withrow, just said, how important it is for us to be that bridge and the conduit for the community. And we do engage the community constantly. And one of our most, I guess you could say, one of the things that we look at to be one of the most important things that we do with the community is we educate the community through our initiative, The Law in Your Community. Another initiative that we've been working on for some time is called the Pittsburgh Plan for Peace. And it involves young people and surveying and trying to figure out exactly what they want to see as far as their police officers. So I'm just gonna kind of close down a little bit because I am coming in on the tail end. But I do want to say that I've been a member of Noble for over 20 years, and I've appreciated the mentorship, the guidance that the Noble community has provided for me. And I have also considered it to be a privilege and an honor, and also a calling, as I had mentioned, to be a servant for the city of Pittsburgh and for the community that I reach out to on a daily basis. Thank you.
Are you gonna just touch on the outreach?
Oh, I forgot to mention, I mean, not that I forgot to mention, but I didn't know exactly where we had taken this entire programming since
But address some of the initiatives within Pittsburgh Police.
Okay, well, some of the initiatives that we have within Pittsburgh Police, I actually wrote them down because we have so many. But of course, you know of group violence intervention. That's one of our most, I guess you could say, one of our most beneficial and most successful initiatives that we've had within the last 5 years with our outreach workers who are boots on the ground with the young people, meeting them and trying to curtail a lot of the violence that we have in our communities. As a matter of fact, in the last 5 years, we have really enjoyed, I guess you can say, or we have dropped the crime rate over 30%. So that's some good numbers. We have Coffee with the Cop. I'm sure that a lot of you guys have engaged in that. We have barbershop reading where we read to young people in the barbershop. Of course, we have town hall meetings. We have a lot of stuff with love. That's around the Thanksgiving time of the year when we actually go out and give meals to people and families that are in need of food. We have open houses. We had the Cops and Hoops program. We have a lot of basketball programs. As a matter of fact, we have opened up a new CEO office. It's the Office of Community Engagement, which we're pushing out a lot of programming to the community. We have fireside chats with the community. Of course, we're a big proponent of the Special Olympics. And it goes on and on and on. We work with muscular dystrophy. We have the Zone 5 community, I guess you could say the community open house. And of course, we have the public safety community meetings on a quarterly basis throughout the year. So just to touch on a few things, that's a few of the things that the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police do, but we're constantly trying to improve our initiatives and be, as I mentioned, a conduit to the community to build that bridge between police and the community.
Okay, thank you, Chief Bickerstaff. I'm just going to tie things up before we have a respond to questions. I've been in law enforcement for 43 years, just retired. It was time on the 31st of July. To me, there is no better profession. There are, like any profession, there's good and there's bad. Believe me, there is more good in policing than there is bad. You'll have some bad incidences here and there, and unfortunately, they may cause a loss of life. But overall, what police do is far, far better than what you may see in the media repeatedly. This is a profession that I joined in 1977. It has advanced. You talk about police reform, believe me, there has been a lot of police reform from that time to this day. And there's a lot of outreach. There was a time when I don't believe that police felt there was a issue with minority communities. You know, that's just, you enforce the law, you patrol, whatever, but they didn't realize the breakdown of services, of having a relationship with the minority community existed. Over time, that has changed to where police actually go out and try to engage the community. But it takes a level of cooperation on both sides. You have to be able to listen to what's going on. Part of our presentation today, we just wanted to give you just an idea of what was going on especially on the Noble side, because the majority of us are minorities in policing, and we've had long careers, and in our own ways and organizationally, we have tried to bridge that gap between law enforcement and the minority community, because the minority community is one that has lack of resources. They don't always get the same type of service as other areas in the community. So that's one of the things that we work to try to address. We have a template that President Obama's 21st Century Task Force, I mean, that's the template for all police departments to follow. It was well thought out. There was several people, a lot of Noble members who participated on that task force to come up with those tenets. And then all we have to do is put those processes in place for building trust and legitimacy, police policy oversight, community policing and crime. I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done, but we have to be able to sit down and talk to one another without just closing down and not having an open dialogue. Now, and I know that there's a lot of outrage about an arrest that was made this past Saturday with a protester. I'm no longer in law enforcement, but I spent 39 years with Pittsburgh and 4 years with Allegheny County. What occurred at that particular incident, the specific details, I don't know. I know that Chief Bickerstaff can't really even talk about it because there's a possibility of litigation or an open investigation. So I know that sometimes things happen so quickly that you utilize the resources that you have available at the time to try to de-escalate a situation before it gets out of hand. I don't know the particulars about that particular case, but just thinking that if I was still on the force and there was an emerging situation and we wanted to de-escalate it, first thing that we would do is try to get in, remove the problem and get out of the area and try to talk to individuals there. So as I said, I don't know exactly what happened, but you need the police and the police need you, the community. I mean, we have to work together. There's no them against us. That mentality that was back in the late 70s, 60s, 50s, them against us mentality. It's all of us that are in this together now, and we really have to learn how to work together. Dr. McMillan talked about that guardian mentality. You have to have a warrior's heart. You have to be able to, if the trouble's over there, you have to be able to run over there and not run the opposite way. So you need that warrior's heart, but the guardian mentality is that whole protect and serve. And that's one of the things that when I was in law enforcement, both with the city and Allegheny, is that service. That service, that's a missing piece. Yes, we protect. And sometimes in our effort to protect, you know, we utilize what we think is the right tactic, what is the right thing to do, but we haven't really necessarily engaged the community to say what you think. I remember when I was a Zone 5 commander, when I was assistant chief of operations, in Homewood, we would have, this was kind of like during the gang era, and we would have a rash of homicides and shooting and violence in a particular area. The first thing that we thought of to address that issue, to put a stop to it, we called it zero tolerance. Zero tolerance. We thought that was the solution. Bring everything that we had, cars from different zones, the SWAT trucks, the cycles, you know, to go in, flood that area and quell the violence that was going on. Okay, that was the police talking to the police. And we thought that that was the thing to do, but it wasn't. The bad guys, the criminal element, you know, it's almost like they say, hey, here they come. Let's lay low. And so who we were impacting was the civilians who lived in that area, the people that was going back and forth to work. Their cars might have had, the registrations might have been bad, you know, the inspection stickers bad. That's who we were stopping in traffic stops. That's who we were impacting. And the criminal element knew we couldn't keep that up for so long. So it might be a week, 2 weeks at the most, we could keep that strategy up. And as soon as we had to pull out, then they came back out and kept the whole thing going. We have to communicate with the community, and we have to listen. Sometimes because we have our stats, we have our forms and graphs and everything, we think we have the answers. And we don't always. We don't always. We need that community input. And I just want to say that in order for police reform to work, we have to be able to sit down in a room or on Zoom or whatever and dialogue and listen to one another. I remember when the U.S. Attorney had his community police task force, Dr. Harris, Tim, if you're on there, you know, because we sat across that table. When that first initiated, I mean, it was, we were, you know, back and forth, you know, they were talking back by Johnny Gamage days, and and things. It was almost like a hatred in the room, because everything that was inside just came out on the table. But we had to go through that. We had to go through that in order to move to the next level. So sometimes you got to get all that out, have honest, frank dialogue. You know, if you talk about, is Pittsburgh a racist city? Well, all of the city, no. Some of the systems that were still in place are racial. You know what I mean? Some of those systems that are in place, some of the things, and you'd have to be a minority to know that there's a lot that needs to change, not just in policing, though overall the whole city. There's a whole lot of things, especially in the criminal justice system. You know, there's a lot that has to change, but we have to work together, and that cooperation has got to be on both sides. And so with that, I think I will turn it back over to Dr. Bullock.
Well, thank you to our speakers and the sharing of information about all of your responsibilities and the various charges and leadership roles that you have provided. It was great, it was informative, and it allows us to see it through a different lens, to have a different view on the work of Noble. So we will now turn it over to members of the task force to ask questions. As a reminder, if you have a question, so that we can keep it in order, that you would use your hand raise button to be acknowledged, and I will call on you as soon as the recognition comes. Do you have any questions? I see Tim has a hand. He's not using his electronic hand, but no one else has raised. Tim?
I raised my hand, Quentin.
I don't see your
It's
hand.
been raised for 15 minutes.
Patricia Leftwich.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apology. You're at the top.
That's okay.
I see Patricia, Valerie, David, and Angela. Very good. All right, Patricia.
So first of all, I want to say thank you to our guests for speaking with us today. I really appreciate you letting us know more about what it is that your organization does, and also speaking about your perception of law enforcement. And just like Miss Bryant said, I do recall Homewood of the early 90s. I lived there on Hamilton, and I do remember Zone 5 Police Department and different community initiatives that happened when I was a child. But going to this weekend, which is going to be a huge part of what we all need to talk about today. When we talk about things like de-escalation, protection, tactics, and engage in the community, even zero tolerance practices, the actions that were done this weekend on that protester undermines a lot of the work that we're all trying to do. It undermines a lot of what we're speaking about. And I think it's also very important to mention that this protester was not a person of color. He was a young white man on a bike. So I just encourage all of us when we're talking today to remember that the public is not privy to this unless they're tuning in and listening. The only thing that they're going to hear or see is that a person went up to a van in an unmarked van with plainclothes police officers, pointed assault rifles, and picked this person up. Everyone is on edge and has a lot of fear that we are nearing another Portland, Oregon situation here in Pittsburgh. And we have to address that, have the plain language and how that's going to be handled and prevented. I do not know what current practice is that allows this to be a thing, but it needs to stop. There's no reason why anyone should be picked up while they're protesting in an unmarked van by armed police officers, whomever it may be, because not only does it send a message of, you know, you have the right to protest or to be heard, but only to a certain extent, but it also, now we've gone backwards. We've lost public trust. People don't believe that we're doing enough. People don't even think that the task force is beneficial. And what we do not want is for all the progress that we are making to be not, because there's no trust from the public end. So I just wanted to say that I know that a lot of my constituents have a lot that they would like to add in, but I wanted to bring that point up that, you know, our goals are the same. And like you mentioned, all of you have mentioned, we are not the enemy with each other. We have a common one. And a huge part of that enemy is a lack of understanding and a lack of trust. And the only way that we're going to be able to fix that is through what's currently happening right now and how we address that in the time being, way before this report even gets finished. So thank you all very much for your time. I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Valerie, go ahead. Ms. Bryant.
Oh, I just wanted to say to Ms. Leftwich is that.
Sorry, I just realized you couldn't see me.
Oh, okay. From my understanding, the task force is gathering information and having listening sessions, and from that, there's going to be a report drafted. So to say not doing enough, you're still in the infant stages. So I think that should not be it. But because of one incident or because of a negative incident or outcome, don't stop working. Find out what happened, you know, and make sure that it doesn't happen again. I'm on the outside now, but I can almost guarantee you're not going to see any white vans coming up, putting anybody in them, taking them off at a protest. Now, as I mentioned before, that might have been an escalating situation, and there were no marked units close by. I'm not sure, but I would like to think that was an escalating situation, and that's what those on scene at the time felt was the best course of action to de-escalate something further happening. So, but don't throw it all out, you know, because, okay, look what they did over there. Fix it. You have to dialogue, you have to work together. It's cooperation on both sides. If something happened in the police department, and so the chief, what's up? What's going on? You know what I mean? You want answers, but a specific case, I can tell you. Now, the city has a law department, and they'll say, shh, you know what I mean? Because they got to pay out big bucks. So some things that they can't talk about, but that doesn't mean that they don't recognize, the community didn't like this one. We got to fix it. I can almost guarantee you won't see that again.
You won't.
You know, I can almost guarantee you. And I'm not there because I know if I would have been there, all the chiefs would have been called to a meeting. What happened? What, you know, why did we do this? Blah, blah, blah. So don't stop working. This task force, I commend the mayor for putting it together. Because one of the things you said, you lack of understanding. There's so many people who don't understand what police do, why they do it, you know, but the police, you know, don't paint us all with the same brush. Don't paint, because we're not the same. And we are here. I keep saying we, because I just can't get it out yet, but we are here to help you. And it wasn't till 1998 when I joined Noble. And it wasn't until I left Pittsburgh and started attending those Noble conferences all over town, and I was seeing Blacks in law enforcement. I mean, chiefs and directors, and they were running things, and that I built up my confidence. Because I think Pittsburgh, sometimes they'll put you in a box, and as soon as you try to get out of that box, they shove you back down in there. But you have to have your own self-confidence. There's a lot of police officers, Black, white, Hispanic, on Pittsburgh Police, Allegheny County Police, who, as Chief Bickerstaff said, it's a calling. It's not about the paycheck. And there's a lot of officers who, it is about the paycheck. You know what I mean? But there's good and bad. That's why I always believe that you have to have strong leadership and you have to have supervision. You know, because it's like your kids. You send them outside, you done told them what they can do and what they can't do. But if they think you're not watching, they're going to do what they want to do. So strong supervision and good leadership, strong leadership. So that's where it comes to where this task force, yes, you're effective, you know, because you're listening. You're listening to a wide array of people. You know what I mean? You're going to come up with some solutions. You're going to come up with some initiatives. You're going to present them to the mayor, and he's going to send something out saying, okay, do it. Find a way to do it, get it done. But you have to collaborate, both sides.
Thank you.
Valerie?
Thank you. I just have a couple. To Professor Linda Williams, thank you so much for kicking this off. You had just went right down there with all of the initiatives that Noble has taken a stance on. Is it possible for you to share that document so we can post that as part of our document list?
Absolutely. That was a continuation from the prior president, and of course, continuing on in that legislation. I will be happy to share it with you. I'll make sure Marita, President, Withdraw, have it.
Thank you, because it really did hit on many of the very important points. So Lavani, or I should say Assistant Chief Bickerstaff, would you possibly be able to share, I'm not sure if it's posted, there's so many doggone documents and stuff on our portal, who knows, but if it hasn't, can you share all of the listing of all the initiatives that that you oversee as far as being undertaken within the police bureau that you mentioned? Okay.
Okay, a lot of these initiatives I don't oversee per se, but they are part of the Bureau of Police, and I'll make sure you get that listing.
Okay, and I would like to have the full task force to be able to talk about things that are concerning them, particularly the most recent incident to Assistant Chief Bickerstaff. I know you are not at liberty because of possible litigation, investigation, et cetera. And I'm sure all of us task force members understand that. Is there anything that you can give us as far as an update that would be an update to what the mayor has already put out there? And I'm just glad that he shared. Believe me, I understand he was livid, and very livid. So it didn't come out until Sunday, but can you share anything in addition to what has already been out there?
Basically, the mayor's statement is all I can share at this time, but I think it was pretty thorough.
Would you repeat the statement that came out this afternoon?
Assistant Chief
Bickerstaff?
Excuse me?
Would you repeat the statement that came out late this afternoon from the mayor?
I'm not aware of a statement that came out late this afternoon.
It did. It was, I don't know if it was, I just know it came out. It may have been yesterday, but he did say that he was not very happy at all. In fact, he used the word livid to emphasize his degree of disappointment in what happened, and he indicated that this would never ever happen again. It will be under further investigation, but that is his public statement. I do know we need, Tim, I asked the mayor's office staff to share that with all the task force members. You have it in your
I did see it. I just wanted it stated.
Yes, yes.
Record.
Something we can talk
There are
about
other people watching this broadcast who wouldn't have seen what we saw this afternoon.
Right. So after we finish up with everyone's hands raised and questions, that's when we can talk about that further. There was something else, but who knows? I forget.
Before we get to the issue
Tim, you're coming up. You have 2 more to go.
Oh, 2 more, okay.
David?
Thank you all for your presentations this evening. It was a great pleasure to hear you and a great pleasure to see folks I've had the privilege of interacting with before, Chief Bryant, Assistant Chief Bickerstaff, Ted. I want to direct my question particularly to Assistant Chief Bickerstaff. There was one thing that you said that really caught my attention. when you're talking about the group violence initiative, intervention, excuse me, you called that the most successful thing going on now, if I wrote that down right, most successful intervention we've had, and you credited that with a drop in crime of 30%, which is pretty extraordinary. I've heard about this, of course, and I think it was the subject of one of the recent city council laws that was passed. I'd like it if you could talk some about how that works, who runs it, what is the role, if any, of the police department, because that sounds like something, if it's that effective, that we want to be behind. Thank you very much.
Sure. Sure. Group violence intervention is an initiative that actually is part of the 21st century policing. We started that back in, I want to say back in 2015, and it primarily focuses in on all of our nonviolent, I shouldn't say nonviolent, but our non-fatal shootings. And we have a group of outreach workers. They're like a conduit to us. Before COVID-19, of course, we were at the hospital a lot, but right now we've kind of slowed down a bit. But the outreach workers meet the young men where they are. They offer them resources. We have custom notifications where we actually talk to the young men to see exactly what their needs are. We work with probation and parole, and of course we work with other federal agencies, but primarily our focus is that we want you to stay out of jail, stay alive, and any type of resources that we can provide to help mend the gap, we want to be there to provide it. We have a lot of outreach workers that are in the communities. We used to have them, we haven't had any celebrations this year, like the 4th of July, but generally when the young people are downtown, we have outreach workers with us so that they can actually be that connecting factor. And we don't have to use the police. We can talk to the young people, keep them safe. So basically, our group violence intervention initiative is the police and these young outreach workers working together to mend the gap or to be a conduit to keep the violence down. So we've met with a lot of success. We have outreach workers throughout the city of Pittsburgh. Some of them are young people who have been in the lifestyle, and some of them are not. But they have been very successful in making sure that young people understand that the police are there to keep them safe and to keep them out of jail and to put them on the road so that they can be successful in life.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know others here have been involved in some of these too. I want to just acknowledge that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Angela?
Yes, thank you. So Patricia made one of my comments in terms of addressing the issue that happened this weekend. For the group, we have what we've referred to as the unbundling subcommittee. So as we address this continuum between where we are now and, like a complete defunding versus abolishment, there is a police, there's, somewhere else where it's like, do we look at ways that we can have activities and responsibilities that police are taking on now that could be potentially diverted to other groups. So for example, looking at 911 calls and seeing whether there are options for what is initiated as a non-criminal call to be able to go to some type of outreach worker or a human services, social service agency. So just wanted to reach out to the group of Noble representatives that are here just to get some initial reactions on that type of approach as it relates to unbundling and looking at different ways of 911 calls.
Okay, no one's answering.
That for me would be one of the reasons that there needs to be some collaboration, because I'm not certain what kind of call would be made where you would not send law enforcement if it was law enforcement based. So I think that really, I don't know if can be answered on this call, but it would be examples, of what kind of calls where you would not send a police officer, you would send someone else.
So an example, truancy. or potentially drug overdose.
Yeah.
One of
Yeah.
the, oh, go ahead.
I don't know if you can hear me. One example you might want to think about is looking at some of the things that Richmond Police Department did. They actually started a program back in the 90s, and unfortunately it was defunded by the city council, where on certain calls for service, the police and social services actually went to the house. And when it was determined that it was safe for social services to engage, they got involved, because a lot of these issues on the calls for service, they were really areas that went to the heart and fabric of the socioeconomic condition of that family and other things. And you're seeing several models around the country where departments are in fact starting to look at revisiting those types of approaches as this conversation is occurring relative to transforming and reforming and reimagining policing in the United States. So that might be an area that you might want to delve into and looking to see how you have social services, whether it's for mental health issues or just the issues within that family, addressing the situation, not necessarily singularly by the police department.
Thank you.
There are initiatives that are already starting here in Allegheny County, and I know that the Department of Human Services are starting to look at how they can address it too. There used to be a pilot program in Zone 1. It had to be in the mid 2000s, where there was a social service advocate or worker who was housed in Zone 1 police station, and she would respond to certain calls with police, or the police would give her referrals to do a follow-up on certain calls. I think that initiative will work, whether it's with mental health or whether it's with dealing with substance abuse or something like that. Having a civilian counterpart who has a expertise in that particular area. Because right now, police have to do everything. The call comes in, regardless of what's going on, you're supposed to go there and solve the problem for the people. And sometimes you're just, you're not equipped with everything you need to help that individual. You may be able to put a Band-Aid on it or something like that. I do believe that civilians, specialized workers, can work with the police and respond to calls, but there has to be a process in place. There has to be training. I think where it will initiate mostly is through the 911 call dispatcher receiving that call. And it almost has to be something where you're simultaneously connecting to this person and the police. I think just like now, if the medics receive a call and there's like a shooting or something like that, the medics may lay back a little bit until the police go in and clear the scene, and then the medics can come in. It's almost like on that same principle, which I don't think that you have like a mental health call that you can just send a mental health worker there without some police response. You know what I mean? Maybe the police lay back until they get there, but the police have to be nearby in case that call becomes violent, so that they have a backup right there with them, or they respond together. But those discussions are taking place. I know with Department of Human Services, the Health Department, everybody's trying to figure out how we can do this better. And it's like a police officer coming out straight out the academy is responding to, when they get out of field training, they're responding to calls and they're expected to answer or fix everybody's problem. You know what I mean? It's too much when you have social service workers out there that can help you do your job better.
Ms. Bryan, if I may, really quickly, because what Angela and I are talking about is the same, and I don't want to overtalk anyone. I know there are hands up, but this is really pertinent to what you just said, and I want to mark it down. So I want to circle back. You said specialized civilians. Could it be that maybe what we're missing here is that what we need are specialized police?
police officers who have special training in which that is their job. There's an officer that they only do mental health calls. There's an officer that they go strictly to calls where there is an overdose, and they're working directly with these specialized civilians who have these credentials. That maybe that's what we're missing, is we're not thinking about how we can specialize police officers into certain roles that they would be equipped to do a blend of a job. Is that something?
There's certain officers who have specialized training. It's CIT, stands for Crisis Intervention Training, but to deal with mental health situations. But you only have so many officers, and the overabundance of calls, you can be pulled from one to another. Having civilian assist just kind of takes the burden off the police department, because you can't have a lot of specialized officers that that's all they do, and you have all hell breaking out over here. You know what I mean? But they're specialized. So you got to kind of like flush it out a little bit better.
Okay, thank you.
Tim?
Dr. McMillan, near the beginning, you mentioned about building trust between the community and the police and reducing crime reduction. But how do you get that done specifically?
Well, again,
personally, and thank you all for being with us today and for sharing your information and wisdom. But on that specific piece of specificity, I'm trying to look for more specifics on how to do that.
Trust is an ongoing thing. You're not going to develop it just by, as I was using a euphemism, of dating somebody. You want the police to be married with the community. So there's got to be a level of engagement where there's interaction, there's communication, there's conversation. You look around the country and there's some calling for pulling police out of schools as SROs and things of that nature. Frankly, there's some value in having youth engage positively with police in schools to develop trust. But that's not to the extent of using an SRO as a de facto vice principal or within that school to handle truancy issues, to handle bad conduct of a fourth grader or something like that. It's to have positive engagement. So when you're looking at building trust and legitimacy, even through the lens of the 21st Century Policing Report, it's about ongoing sustained engagement. It can't be drive-by. It can't be a flash in the pan where you have an initiative today and now next week you don't have that initiative. Or you're rotating, you develop trust through communications. So while it may seem somewhat conceptual that this concept of developing trust and legitimacy, legitimacy is through procedural justice. The community needs to understand that the way they're being treated in one section of the city is the same that they would if they lived on the other side of town. So if your calls for service in one part of the city and that demographic is of a different ethnicity than the other side, and you've got an upside balance in how those calls for service are being responded to, that's going to erode legitimacy because the public data will pretty much show that. So it's through your actions. It's through you as a community, like they did in the Illumination Project in Charleston, South Carolina, come together and say, okay, we've got these different polarities here, but we can in fact come to the table and say there's certain things I want to be policed the same way in zone 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 that I would if any other city in this country. And to the extent that the police department demonstrates that and the community accepts it through those sustained actions. And unfortunately, you're always one incident away from eroding trust, one incident away from eroding legitimacy. And it's not as if police officers wake up every day saying, I'm gonna go out and do a bad thing. Most guys on the job are going out there to protect and to serve. Are there police officers or persons in the profession doing things they should not? Absolutely. And those are the guys you want to identify through a variety of techniques, early warning system, things like that, to get them off the job. Because the longer they stay there, the worse it's going to be from a trust and legitimacy perspective. So to Mr. Stevens, to your question, it's through sustained engagement. It's not flash in the pan. It's not you issuing a report. It goes out for 9. The 21st Century Policing Report was a great template that unfortunately current administration stepped away from the day they took office. The blueprint was there, but they kind of stepped away from it. And that's the unfortunate thing. So the policing will do no more or no less than you, the community, direct it to do. You are the ones that decide the laws within your communities. If you don't want chokeholds, you can control that right now. So I'll wrap it up by literally saying, trust and legitimacy is through sustained effort and activity by both the police and the community.
Some of what we're also needing is recruitment in the community. We need to have more youth who are interested in coming into law enforcement, that know the community, that are trusted in the community. It's going to be very difficult to have someone who lives in Mount Washington, or even, some far-reaching community in Allegheny County, continually to come into Homewood, into Wilkinsburg, into the North Side, and that trust be there. So there has to be a full court press on recruiting youth and having them interested in coming into law enforcement.
Since I'm on recruitment, what specific ideas, Ted, can we really use to get recruitment of African Americans with the negative image that so many of our young people have, and adults for that matter, of police today? Let's be honest, it's not the greatest moment of image between the police and the community, or of the police by the community.
Yeah, part of it is, I know that at Westinghouse, they have it's almost like ROTC for firefighters. I think we have to go in, and there has to be law enforcement clubs or social work clubs, and they have to start early. And you have to take them and give them some experience, the good experiences about being law enforcement. You have to connect them to law enforcement, and you have to show them the parts of law enforcement that they don't see. They have to be able to develop a relationship with those police officers who are very, very interested in, and then also connecting them with other law enforcement personnel who come from that area. Though that's how you're doing recruitment, and it has to be ongoing. Like Joe said with Richmond, the problem we have is inconsistency. We have good ideas, and then all of a sudden the money goes away, or another power party comes in and they don't think it's necessary, or they don't like that, so it disappears. Children are so used to being disappointed, and we have to be consistent. This cannot be a one-day, a one-year program. You have to raise them in that kind of atmosphere.
Even your law enforcement explorer programs are good programs. You see models around the country where if you've got an active law enforcement explorer program in your community, that can be a feeder to your police department. But now you want the right people leading that law enforcement explorer program that embrace the tenets of community policing, that embrace the tenets of 21st century policing. But what better idea to have a young youth from high school to college that says, okay, yeah, I want this as a discipline that I want to go into for life. And again, as the former Vice President Biden said when he was in office, show me where your money is, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what's important to you. If it's not in your budget, it's not important to you. So to the extent these initiatives and these types of things are funded to develop, to do the recruitment that we're talking, that Ted was speaking about, that I'm speaking about, that's where the rubber meets the road.
I just wanted to mention very quickly, I don't know how I forgot to mention it. Noble has collegiate chapters throughout our organization. And these are Noble chapters where students have their own executive board, and they do many of the same things that we do at our local chapters, that those collegiate chapters are throughout the organization. And we're trying to get one started at Cal U University. Our very first collegiate chapter was
Dr.
No,
McMillan, what
those
was the
don't
third name?
students, I mean,
I'm sorry.
Do you have one at University of Pittsburgh?
no, we do not.
Dr.
Would you be
McMillan, what was
interested in starting one at University of Pittsburgh?
Yes, we would.
We should connect then.
Okay.
Dr. McMillan, what was the third name of law enforcement something program? What was the third word?
The Law Enforcement Explorer Program.
Oh, Explorer. Okay, thank you.
Explorer Program.
Richard?
Thank
Richard?
I want to thank all of you for your presentation. I appreciate it. So one of the things that I think that is really needed, especially because of the environment right now, my phone has been blowing up all day. It's about transparency. And I heard Lavani saying, I understand that it's still being investigated, but due to the environment, you know, there has to be something said, you know, about what happened with this event this weekend. I mean, the community is livid about, you know, something being done. And just because of us being on this task force, you know, people really want to see if we really got any legs. I mean, there's something that is going to have to become, that we have to say at the coming out of this meeting, you know, that the public really wants to hear, you know what I mean?
Rich, I'm thinking, because I didn't say much about it, because I thought we were going to talk about it as a task force.
Yeah, I know. I know, but it's something that's burning, that's
well,
out
sure.
there, man. You know, and look, I believe in everything that y'all have said. The collaboration is so important. All the different programs that the city of Pittsburgh has right now, and the outreach workers, all the different things that they're doing and stuff like that. But, you know, it is really important that this transparency, you know, be really, you know, people want to hear it. People want to see it.
And you're correct, Richard. Transparency is key. I remember years ago, it was always no comment. It was a shooting or something happened, it was no comment. But I think that has changed a little bit. I thought someone did come out and speak. Maybe it was the mayor who did a statement. But I know I saw Chief Schubert on one of the news channels. But transparency, yes, it is key. You need the community wants to know what happened. Why did you do that? You know what I mean? Absolutely. So I know that they want to know, and hopefully in some type of framework, some statements will be made.
You know, and just one other thing, and I said it a couple weeks ago. Used to be when I first started this work that a young person would say that they wanted to be a police officer. You know, that's not something that you're saying again. This now in this day and age, you know, we gotta rectify that. You know, and I'm hoping that more programs like you suggested or that you talked about, each of you talked about, that it gets in the schools, that it gets in the universities. You know, so that our young people can get into this law enforcement. You know,
I know a lot of times when we go out and we have the Law in Your Community presentations, we get more questions from the adults than we do from the kids, because they're talking about things that happened to them 20 years ago. But it's something that they never cleared up. Nobody ever explained it. Why did this happen to me? You know, was this right? When they did this, was that right? You know, so that dialogue is so important. And sometimes just having listening sessions, you know, community forums, just to get it out there, you know, that's how you can move forward, move beyond.
Juvenile probation did a program. Juvenile probation did a program. Marita, do you remember they brought a lot of the young kids on their caseload into, I think we were out at the waterfront, and there were a number of police officers. And what was so amazing about that program was that at the beginning, the youth sat on one side, police officers sat on the other, and both of them were huffing and puffing, we don't want to be there. Really, by the end of that day, when you had police officers, even the old guard, sitting down with a young kid, having dialogue and having conversation, it was really, I was impressed, because at the beginning of the day, I said, this is a waste of time. But it wasn't. But those are the things that need to be done. Wilkinsburg does a police academy. And a couple of the Mad Dads and some friends of mine have gone through that police academy, where they understand now, from the lens of a law enforcement person, what it's like to go out. What they're thinking every day that they put that uniform on and go into the community, not knowing what they're going to be. I think that kind of understanding, those kinds of meetings and getting together, bring more of an understanding on both sides where there is dialogue. And again, that takes people sitting down and not pointing fingers, but really trying to understand what's going on both sides.
Ted.
This group has a perfect opportunity to start that.
Hey, Ted, that program you were speaking about was a DMC, disproportionate minority contact. And the city of Pittsburgh does have a youth, a young persons or young people's citizens police academy and an adult citizens police academy. So we definitely have both of those programmings. And the DMC, I think they discontinued that initiative because of the money.
Right.
Funding.
I'm gonna
we're doing a program in Wilkinsburg with Liz Miller is doing a Pittsburgh study with young people. But there's also Noam Conti from Duquesne University is going into the penitentiary inside out with police officers volunteering to go inside the penitentiary and talk to guys, trying to develop a relationship. And it's been good. It's been good. So I'm not here to bash the police. I mean, there's some different things.
Richard.
There's some different things that's going on I know about, you know, and I collaborate. You know, how much y'all probably tired of me calling you Lavani and Marita.
Yeah, you had me on speed dial there for a minute.
I got Lavani on speed dial now.
Hey, Richard, we are part of that in and out program at Duquesne that goes into the jail. So we definitely participate in that initiative also.
Yeah, I know. Good.
Hey,
Nathaniel.
Interrupt, but Lavon, can you please find out who developed the curriculum in the schools as far as the public safety curriculum, which is kind of very broad. It's not really focused on police as I'd like it to be. Can you find out who developed the curriculum with the Pittsburgh schools, and has there ever been a review or a assessment about effectiveness? That's all. Thank you.
Are you talking about this? Are you talking about the Citizens Police Academy for the young people?
You know, I'm talking about both. I'm talking about the Westinghouse curriculum as well as the police academy.
Okay, I got you.
Thank you.
I'm asking our co-chairs, because of the passion of the day, and because before we lose people from our group, that we address the issue of the day and politely excuse our guest so we can talk about that.
Now, Pam, we have other people that have had their hands raised for a while. We want to make sure we get them in.
Nathaniel.
Thank you, Dr. Bullock. And thank you to everyone who presented today. It's very much appreciated. My question is directed towards Assistant Chief Bickerstaff, and others maybe feel free to jump in as well with your perspectives. But the first part of my question is, you know, we are emphasizing change in culture at the police, at the PBP, in order to really affect change, right? You need more adoption of this guardian model versus this current warrior model with frontline, you know, rank and file officers. The first part of my question is, what are the biggest hurdles that you see from your perspective in terms of adoption of that cultural change, adoption of the guardian model versus the warrior model with rank and file officers. And then the second part of my question is, when it comes to implementing this change culturally, I tend to be a big believer that to implement cultural change, it needs to come from the top, and you need to set the example with leadership. And so the second part of my question is, how do we reconcile adoption of this guardian model versus the warrior model within PPP when we have examples such as what occurred this past weekend that wasn't really a commensurate response of in terms of from the police force versus the threat that was posed to begin with. And I get the sense that we talk about, again, this adoption of the guardian model versus the warrior model, but when we see when we see a response like that, to me, it says that there's a policy in place that there is more of a use of force, if you will, than is warranted, given this was a peaceful protest. I mean, we saw assault rifles, we saw unmarked vehicles, and so forth. And so I'm trying to understand how we can reconcile that. And to be fair, Assistant Chief Bickerstaff, I would like to ask these questions at some point of Chief Schubert as well. So, but you happen to be here today, so.
Okay, I get you. You asked me about 4 questions, so I'm going to try to just kind of address each one of them as I remember them. First of all, you're talking about a cultural shift or cultural change, and how you implement that is, like you said, from the top down. But you also have to get with those informal leaders. Believe me, the police get it. We want to be better. We want to be more efficient. We want to be more responsive to the communities we serve. Not only is it because we value that partnership, but we understand that that's how we become effective. And it's very easy when you have cooperation to solve issues opposed to when you have opposition. So of course, we top down, that warrior mentality versus the guardianship. The guardianship is always more effective. Informal leaders, and what I mean by informal leaders, the people in the zones, they don't have to be supervisors. They can be people that have that appeal, the appeal that makes you want to ask them a question because you feel that they're knowledgeable. So those are the 2 quintessential points. We have to have it top down, and we have to have this guardianship mindset permeate in the zone level. And what I mean by that, the sergeants, the officers who's on the beat, the officers who work the patrol cars, they're the ones who have to actually make sure that this new guardianship way of thinking is actually accepted. So it is a cultural shift. And believe me, it is actually becoming part of our culture day by day. So I heard some very profound things from some of our leaders today as they spoke of, and I'm not talking about commanders and lieutenants and assistant chiefs. I'm talking about sergeants and the officers who's been on the job for a while. They understand how important it is to that mind shift to guardianship versus being a warrior. And the training, of course.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ron?
Thank you. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity. Just to let the guests know, it's my first task force meeting, so always good to ask a question at the first one. I'm Rabbi Ron Simons from the JCC of Greater Pittsburgh. And so I've been in deep conversation with members of the Black community who have educated me about the connection between the beginning of the U.S. police force and those wishing to capture escaped slaves. That is the first police forces, they claim, designed to capture escaped slaves. So I'm curious, is there legitimacy to this historic theory? How do members of Noble respond to this theory, no matter its full or partial veracity? And how might the theory influence our recommendation?
From a historical perspective, the slave patrols, there is a legitimacy historically. And there's a significant amount of literature out there that will speak to that. I think your second question was to what extent and how Noble You know, I think we do it because we're the conscience of law enforcement. We do it through our actions. We do it by demonstrating, as our president stated, what we stand for and what we don't stand for. And we engage with the community and say, that's not why we're here in this community. We're here to be a part of the community. The hardest thing you can break down sometimes are belief systems. And that's the challenge for every community, not just where you are, but just across the country. Because like you said, you can have one incident that will totally erode everything that you worked so hard towards. But the slave patrols were how African Americans were kept in line, if you would, from a policing standpoint. And so there's sufficient historical support for what actually has happened up through the 30s and 40s to a large degree.
If I may add in collaboration with President Woodrow and with Dr. McMillan, of course, it comes back that we have to acknowledge our history. We have to acknowledge it before you can even overcome it. And it starts with the collaboration. We have to acknowledge that this has been done. And of course, that's our history and where we're coming for today. So it's hard to overcome that when we don't address that. And of course, we are part of those communities that people can put a face, that people can see that we are the people that, you know, our church members, we are the people that are right there with you. And so we try to give it a positive image, but it takes a collaborative effort that you have to acknowledge that a wrong has been done, and then just move forward to give a better understanding in the context where we are today. And collaboratively, how are we going to do that? And that's through that communication and that transparency and that accountability. And so that's where it starts. We have to acknowledge it and we have to communicate.
One of the first things I said this evening was, if we can't see a problem, we can't fix it. And we see what this problem is out here today. And it necessitates reform and change to the core of the industry.
And it starts from the top down. If I could just piggyback, just a couple of days ago, coming out the gate, I had a conversation with A.G. Barr, where he says systemic racism does not exist in law enforcement. Now, we're not throwing a blanket on all law enforcement, because we do know that we've changed and we've come a long ways. But how can the very top of our country, the chief officer, law enforcement officer, even deny that existence? So that already puts us at a disadvantage. And that was my challenge. I challenge you to see it differently. Just because one has not experienced it does not negate its existence. And so again, it comes to you have to recognize the problem. You cannot make excuses. You cannot act like it doesn't exist. You have to acknowledge it, and then we can move forward.
Well, I'll just add one sentence without dominating too much. I think that, yes, it's true that that has to happen from the police perspective, but I can't even imagine what it's like to be a Black resident of Pittsburgh, knowing that historical truth and looking at police and some of the challenges that we have today. I have an emotional outpouring for that.
Sharon?
I will pass so we can get to our task force discussion, but I really appreciate this entire conversation and all of our guests' input today. It was really helpful.
Right.
Thank you.
Tony? Tony? Tony, are you on? There you go.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to, go back to the question that Angela was asking about the unbundling. I appreciate, Dr. McMillan, your comments about the joint response with police and Mrs. Bryant, that we can't, for mental health crisis, it may not make sense to send in mental health workers without stabilizing the area. I think that's really appropriate. Having someone that has a lot of mental health individuals in my area, I don't feel comfortable saying that they're going to be the first responders on mental health crisis. But in terms of that, there have been discussions that there are activities that the police are doing that they also feel they should not be responding to. So maybe not a specific item like truancy, but can someone walk us through a process of how we can identify in our unbundling committee what are the types of calls that police officers are responding to that it's not appropriate for them to be responding to?
Lavani, maybe you can answer that one, because for so many years we've responded to all of it. So I'm just trying to think of an example. A lot of, well, this is one. A lot of issues in the schools to where police are called into the schools to address things. Once the police are there, the police have to do what the police do. Sometimes if things can be resolved to where the police didn't actually have to come in, that would keep that child from either going to Schumann or being cited or something like that. It's, is there someone else that could address that rather than having the police come in? The truancy issues, some of the calls for overdose cases, it depends on the type of call it is, but it could be that someone who's with drug and alcohol, would be the response for that. Because a lot of times the police come in, maybe a thing using Narcan or something like that. It depends on the situation, but those are the ones I can think of is in the schools and, on some of the drug calls, some of the calls dealing with juveniles. Lavani, maybe you can.
Okay, I was going to just add a couple like burglar alarms, traffic, minor traffic accidents. We don't go to a lot of them. Parking complaints. A lot of people want to put missing persons and runaways in that group, but we really need to kind of look out for our young people and find missing persons and runaways. Those need to be handled by the police. Of course, we talked about the homeless issues, overdoses, the mental health. When we have determined that it's safe for mental health workers, mental health calls, citizens, we check on a lot of well-being, check on the well-being of citizens who's living alone or people haven't seen them for a while. Sometimes they're in their houses and they're in need of services. This has come out a lot for us now for the COVID-19. There's a lot of people who need wraparound services. Those are just a few that I could think of. There's people that are involved in hoarding and there's animal violations. I mean, there's a lot of issues, or when you talk about unbundling, that we could probably pass that on to another social service entity.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to jump off because I initiate the Zoom call for our local chapter meeting, which starts at 6:30. So okay. Thank you again.
For the committee, I just have one more thing real quick. I cannot think of the guy's name who were asking me the question about guardianship versus warrior mentality, but the police are going through a training called the Active Bystander for Law Enforcement Training, and I'll make sure you get that. It's called ABLE, A-B-L-E, and it addresses a lot of those questions that you had on the table as it relates to as it relates to the warrior mindset versus the guardian mindset. So I'll get those to the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So please allow us to extend our thanks.
Marita will definitely connect. Thank you.
Please allow us to extend our thanks for the representatives from Noble to speak to us tonight, shared some great information, answered some great questions, and we look forward to continuing the conversation and collaborating to further advance the work in law enforcement. So thank you all for your participation tonight.
Thank you.